Welcome to Tracing Your Family Roots. My name is Arlene Sachs. This is Sally Ann Sack, and we're here today to welcome Peter Lande. Peter, welcome. I'm delighted you could come talk to us today. Peter is a volunteer at the Holocaust Museum, but he's going to talk to us about a lot more than that. You want to talk about how it all began? Or
Okay, let me start there.
A long-time volunteer.
It's a long time here. Well, I think the museum has been open, roughly 22 years, and I've been there all 22 years as a volunteer, putting together databases, answering individual inquiries, this kind of thing. But stress one thing, I do not speak for the museum. As long as I've been there, I do not, anything I say today or any other day is my opinion, nothing else. But you know, it's interesting how the museum has developed, and I've watched it over years, and it's changed quite a bit, particularly in the field we're interested in, which is the relationship to genealogy, but also in a broader sense. But again, if you don't mind, let me start back. The museum wasn't the first time that anybody tried to do something with genealogy records, or with Holocaust records, which were of interest to genealogists. This goes back much further. And I thought, if you don't mind, I'd start with sort of the background long before the museum, what was available, what still is available, and then turn to the museum. Okay?
That's fine.
Briefly.
Briefly. You expecting me to be brief?
Yes.
You were really asking for something.
More than 22 years.
Okay. Let's say we've come a long way. One of if you go back the longest way, back to really 1945, you go back to the International Tracing Service, sometimes called Bad Arolsen, where it's located in Germany, and their collection of records, which still they're pretty well tapered off, collecting more. But there's the most fabulous collection. They have records, number of what's called the Central Names Index, which is literally an index, as you might find anywhere else, with 50 million names. Now, that's not 50 million people. No one knows how many people are in there. It could be, the rough guess is 17 million people.
Yeah, there's a room at least this size with little file cabinet cards.
You went there, didn't you? That's both of them.
That's three by five cards.
And they got me on the ladder to go up to the top.
And this whole thing it's incredible of everybody that's asked a question.
And they pulled out Schicklgruber's card for me. You know who that was?
Well, the name, yes.
It was Hitler.
Yes.
They have a card on him.
No, they would have, but it's basically not focused in on perpetrators. It's focused in on victims. And remember, it was not Jews versus non-Jews. It was anybody. And if a person was in for 3 camps, then there were 3 cards.
Right.
So that's why I say 50 million is not a real number.
Move on
it's a number
from the
thing
ITS.
Here. Okay, move from that. Though the important thing is now that the ITS collection was so restricted, access was made very, very difficult for a lot of reasons I don't want to get into today. But now, anyone coming to the museum can sit down on the 2nd floor every day except for 2 days of the year, which are, I'm quizzing you.
Yom Kippur?
Yom Kippur and Christmas. You've got it, the 2 days. If you go to the 2nd floor, literally, you can access all those names, and there'll be always somebody there to help you. There's nothing that beats a personal visit, and I'll come back to this later.
Okay.
But in addition to that, you have, of course, USHMM, which focused in, logically enough, on Jewish victims, and primarily on victims as opposed to survivors, though they've expanded this in more recent times. Then you have a museum, you have, I don't want to get into the ancestry, but ancestry in more recent times, I'll come back to the issue of ancestry on that way. And you have Jewish Gen itself, Jewish Genealogy, the website there, which is a Holocaust database, which is available to anybody at no charge. And this is not a testimonial to them, but I would recommend that anybody there goes to www.jewishgen.org and then go to the Holocaust database or go to the other databases. It's useful. Okay. Now switching, going to what you asked me to do, which is really to focus in on the museum. When it started, it really started as a survivors database. Right. Benjamin Mead, some of you may have heard of Benjamin Mead. He was a New Yorker, and he had developed a database of survivors.
He organized that gathering of Holocaust
That's right, the gathering of survivors, indeed.
From which he created the database with the help of Gary Mokotov.
Right. Okay. That whole database was because he just couldn't manage it anymore.
Right.
He gave it to the museum to run, and indeed that was the start. So the initial thing was survivors. But we quickly became aware that people, sure, they were interested in survivors, but they obviously were interested in victims.
Right.
So now it is HSV, Holocaust Survivors and Victims Registry or database. And for those, if there's anybody in this who's seeing this program, knows the initials in German, HSV, are HSV. Okay, it's just the same initials. But for anybody who's German, it has a special meaning. Having nothing to do with the Holocaust. HSV is the Hamburg Sportverein, the most famous soccer team in Hamburg. So every time when they used to do this, I would laugh because I was once a Fulbright student in Hamburg and think this is a soccer thing. But it's not soccer.
Okay.
All right. HSV grew gradually. I remember the first thing we ever did, we took some material from the National Archives on Dachau. Why Dachau? It just happened to be there. It was there because we had it, exactly. Sure. And we developed that into a database. We did another one on special forms of that people in Auschwitz had to fill out. We did a variety of small tasks that way that were available from public sources.
Okay, and this was in the archives part of the museum, or
this is separate.
The way it's
There's
organized.
A library, and I'll come back to that. There's the archives, which are both what they sound like.
It's the fourth floor.
Yeah, and it's on the fifth floor, but it's the HSV is HSV.
It's separate. It's the registry.
It's the resource. Technically, its name's changed several times. It's now called the Resource Center. Which is an appropriate name.
Okay. Now, that's the one on the second floor?
On the top.
Well, on the second floor is just simply the public access to it.
That's what I
There's a
thought.
place there with a number of computers. There's someone sitting there at all times, including on weekends, who will gladly sit down with you and have you have access to everything that we have.
When you say that, I have a question, because I recently had some exchange with Megan Lewis, who I guess is the librarian.
Yeah, she is one of them.
And she wanted us to focus on her catalog.
Right.
So how is the registry, what does the catalog have that the registry doesn't have, or what does the registry have that the catalog doesn't?
Well,
what's the difference between the two?
Okay, the archives and the library work together. They're literally on one group. They are three people. And the archives has material that hasn't necessarily been indexed. All kinds of things. It has, and I'll come back to library books later, there's library books which obviously haven't been done. And so there's a lot more going on there. She's focusing in on a good archival approach to material.
To research, because basically I think from that what I get is just because a name isn't in that second floor computer doesn't mean that the USHMM complex doesn't have some material somewhere about some person that you're interested in.
So
anybody,
sorry.
I'm trying to, if you're going to do research, you really should go upstairs.
No.
You should start on the second floor.
First of all, it's easy. And you have somebody there with the computers that can search our database. All right, let's start with that one. The database we have has roughly 7 million names. Again, it's not 7 million people. I repeat that point here. Of which only 3 million or so can be seen from Fairfax County or anywhere outside the building. That's because there are restrictions by the donors of the material.
Yes.
It's not because we don't want to do it.
And can't put them online.
Can't put them online.
Okay, like
exactly.
the ITS material.
Well, the ITS is separate, yes, but that's the same idea.
It's the same.
That is, you can see it on the second floor. That's clearly the place to go. You will get the ITS material, you'll get everything that we have that has been collected in HSV.
I want to summarize this for a second. You're saying that the museum we'll call the museum generically, holds material that it can never put online because of restrictions at the time that they were given the material.
Right.
Okay.
The donors have made
Right,
some
so
kind of restriction.
A good deal of the material, however, can be put online. A lot has been put online.
Exactly. And I'll describe how you get that for when you're sitting at home.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, think of restrictions. This was one of the more laughable ones. This was a huge collection. I guess I better not identify the country. It was the National Archives of a country. They said, yes, we may send it to you. Here it is. It's a huge collection. There's only one condition. No one on the staff and no one outside the building, neither one could ever see it. Well, it was, for those of you who are very sophisticated, you'll maybe guess, they had a 60-year rule, 60 years from, and so 60 years, after 60 years now, it was possible. But when it first came in and said, you can have it, but you can't look at it, the first thing, of course, I did was to look at it, but that's just my way.
But in a way that protects them if something should happen to where their material is stored, that it's someplace else in the world.
Absolutely.
Right.
And there are very, this gets switches somewhat from Holocaust stuff, but there is a very different concept of privacy in Europe versus the United States. Yeah. People complain here, and you always see rumbling, more should be available. But compared to Europe, we have a wonderful situation in terms of access. So the situation is always go to the second floor first. And then come upstairs. Well, I was going to do this in a different order, but since you've raised it, for example, here is a nice small book. This is one of volumes, I think 17. This is people who were deported.
Hold it up.
I'm sorry. People who were deported from an area near Białystok, so we're talking about eastern Poland.
Right.
Now, this is a story. When the Russians invaded eastern Poland in 1939, they came in and made everybody an offer. And the offer was simply this: would you like Russian citizenship? And some people said yes, and some people said no. What would you have said, Sally Ann?
Well, probably no. And then I would have ended up in a camp in Siberia because I have a friend, can you believe, on Martha's Vineyard, who was a 2-year-old child who was deported to Siberia and now survives and in her late 70s lives on Martha's Vineyard. Many of the Jews who survived that way because they ran to the east.
That's right.
When the Nazis were coming, they ran east into the Soviet Union.
Because if you said no, I just as soon stay, then you were there when the Germans came and they killed you. But here is this is a book in this case. It is on the web, not the museum web. This is on a terribly complicated name, which I suppose I ought to spell out. All right, I won't spell it out. This is available, all this material, and then in most cases, the conditions in the Soviet Union in the early 1940s were terrible. Most of them died of starvation or terrible conditions.
Many did.
Yeah, many, the bulk of them according to this. But some were repatriated.
And even a few were sent to Iran.
That's
Iran
right.
took some, can you believe?
Yeah, there was a movement there we have the list of the people who got to Tehran.
So what you're saying, though, what I want to clarify, the really thorough researcher who's going to take the trouble to make a trip to Washington to come and do research at the Holocaust Museum should not stop at the second floor by all means. In fact, if you went up to the fourth floor to start with, fifth floor, okay, you got me off. If you went up there and said, this is my situation, here's what I'm looking for, what will you get?
But you should have first done what you can online.
Well, right. That's the first thing is you do what you can online.
Okay. And this is how much I have done. And then,
right.
And there you just go to www.USHMM.org, and then you go to name lists, and you will be able to search it. By the way, one of the things that people don't think about, and that this is relevant to the fifth floor as well, in addition to searching for, I don't know, I always use Joe Blow. It's a terrible name. But all right. Whatever you've done your search there, you can also search by town. And this is quite relevant because let's assume that you're interested in Białystok. Maybe your person didn't turn up. But if you hit Bialystok, it will bring you to this book, which you will then have to go to the 5th floor and get from the stacks. By the way, unfortunately, the library is not open on weekends. So it used to be, but staffing, it just couldn't keep it up. So always look, if you hit it fine, the person you're looking for, that's great. If you don't, then start looking for places. And that may lead you into other things. It also will lead you into, and this, very few people are just looking for Holocaust records. Obviously, no genealogist would stop there. They go back as far as they can. In the library, of course, while the focus is not on genealogy or anything before the Holocaust, they have collected things that are of value to a genealogist. Again, the example I was going to use from a library point of view is this book, which is a list. This is actually an index. I don't know if I can hold this up or something.
Yeah, sure. I thought they took pictures of it so they would show it.
It's an index to the holdings of a archive in Germany going back to 1800 through 1945. And it has obscure towns. I thought I knew something about German geography, but I tell you, I don't know these towns. And it even has individual names. That's true. Many of the towns don't exist anymore. Yeah. And then you find out, here you get a whole file on the Mohr family, M-O-H-R. I have no idea. She's a widow, and she's in Freiburg. And there's her husband Heinrich, and Isaias, and Joseph. And this goes back centuries. Now, this is an inventory to an archive in Germany. But now you know, if you find what you want here, where to go to find more information. Mm-hmm. So you want to use, I guess, what I would call the vacuum cleaner approach to genealogy. You take anything you want, you can always discard it, but the first place is a visit. All right, the first place is on the web.
Right.
The second place is a visit to the 2nd floor. Then the 2nd floor, then you go to the 5th floor. And there you consider, and you've already searched, you can search the library catalog, of course, on the web. You can wander into the stacks. It's one of the rare places where you can still wander into library stacks. Yes. That's really rather unusual nowadays.
Right. What kind of security do you have then?
Shh, I won't get into that. Okay, that's not my field. That's not my field.
But they're making sure that
they have a web. They have a system by which not many.
Because so much of the Library of Congress disappeared.
Oh, that's right. I remember looking at that. Yeah, that's another story. That's another story.
I want to ask. Wait a minute. I forgot. Hold on. You look online. Tell me what, if any, availability there is if somebody writes to the museum. If somebody writes and says, I found such and such online, you have a file, can you send me can you send me copies? What ability does the staff have to answer written inquiries?
Okay. It's difficult for me to get organized, you see.
Okay.
So I even took a few notes before I did this. Okay. The answer is yes. If you already know what you want, which is nice, you can write in and request a copy of a page. A page or thing here. Now, let me start with the first thing you might want. You come in and you find nothing.
Right.
And on the web, and you don't have ITS, and you're not going to come to Washington, and you don't have a friend in Washington to do the work for you, so you want to write in. In that case, if you want an ITS search, which is of course the biggest one, as we mentioned, there's a system there, there's a form to fill out. Now let me say the negative here, not negative, but the real life
reality.
Here. The reality is, if you are a survivor, or the family of a survivor, or you have a compensation claim, that gets up the higher priority, which is perfectly logical.
You mean, what you're saying is they have to triage the inquiries, right. And so they make a rank order.
A person who is just looking for cousin Shmuel, who disappeared in 1943, and you're just doing your family tree, then the odds are you might have to wait as long as 2 years.
Okay, here's a question. I was told by somebody who came to that gathering of Holocaust survivors that everybody with the name of Shlomovitz, my grandmother's maiden
yes.
name, from Marmaros County in Hungary, which was hugely Jewish, was related. So I once wrote to the ITS, if you can imagine, and said, send me everything you have on Schlumowitz.
And
of course, I got silence. But then when I went there, I was able, because remember, I went there 3 times, I sat with that before the name index was copied. So I now have, from the name index, everything they have.
Sure.
But if I were somebody listening, watching this show, and they said, oh, so the Holocaust Museum has copied the ITS index.
Yes.
So what if I write to the Holocaust Museum and say, send me everything you have? That can't be answered,
Well,
can
no,
it?
the answer, it can be answered, but I'd put you in the absolute bottom of the pile.
Okay.
To be honest.
Well, that's important to know.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
these are the kind of requests that are horrible. Just think, somebody comes in, well, I know the family comes from Poland, and I believe their name was Cohen. You know, I mean,
Forget that.
Right. Yeah, but
you
this
should
is a more,
lose an inquiry
this is a
like
more
this.
specific.
No,
what you're saying,
even by town.
Yeah, but what you're saying is, what I'm asking is, if the request is, the mail request is too huge and would require too many hours, it's not likely that the museum can handle that, right?
No, that's a problem, and indeed it will go down to the bottom of the pile. But now that you mentioned Hungary, I have to tell you, one of the things I wanted to come to was, what can your viewers do, not only to help themselves, but to help other people? Mm-hmm. And the Hungary thing reminds me, one of our 2 current projects that we have, where people outside the museum are developing databases, is the Wallenberg passports. Mm-hmm. We have found these Wallenberg passports, not all of them. We found 5,000, which with family members, I don't know the number. And this has gone out to the Hungarian...
Why don't you tell people what the Wallenberg
Oh, I'm sorry, that's true.
passports
The Wallenberg was a magnificent guy who was a Swede, Raoul Wallenberg,
a
Swede, and who happened to be assigned to Budapest. And he saw what was going on in 1944. And he gave Swedish passports, not quite technically passports. He gave them documents that protected them from being deported. And nobody knows exactly how many were issued, and but a huge number, certainly in the, well, we have 5,000 and we don't have them all.
Where did you get them from? From who
I've
had
forgotten.
them?
I've forgotten. We don't have the originals. Obviously, the originals went to the people.
Yeah.
But here's an example, one of the rare examples, where you can, in this case, it's gone out to the Hungarian Special Interest Group, and that will then come right back to what I described. It will be on the public part of the website. Then there's a couple of others. It is, one of the things I often...
So what you were saying is, if you're interested in Hungarian things, volunteer for the Hungarian SIG indexing project.
I want to say something.
Arlene.
Remember that Wallenberg never got out. I mean, we've been
true.
talking about him.
The Russians
We might as well think.
The Germans didn't get him. The Germans didn't get him.
Germans
disappeared. He disappeared in the Gulag.
He disappeared after the end of the war.
Yeah.
That's true. Wallenberg, that's true.
There's been stories that so-and-so saw him or something, but he disappeared.
So you touch on something else if we have time for it. The museum has projects or cooperative projects with outside organizations. You mentioned the Hungarian SIG. I know it has a big project with Ancestry. Is that worth talking about?
Yes, I'm glad you asked, because the World Memory Project, that's what this is called.
Ancestry.com.
Ancestry.com, right. This started only a few years ago. It's rather late, because one of the problems, well, first of all, 2 problems. One was Ancestry, you normally have to pay. And obviously we were not prepared to deal with a profit-making thing. Therefore, the agreement was that as far as Holocaust records are concerned, everything is access free. If you put in ancestry.org, you will see, and you put in a name that's related to a Holocaust record, you will get that free. There's no problem.
Okay.
The other aspect of it was,
doesn't come up free when I try it.
It's only for those records that came from this project. Now,
what was the project?
The project,
exactly?
Well, we tried to find collections. First of all, there were no restrictions by definition, and ones that were fairly legible, because their system is they have a double check system, a double blind system. Somebody enters it, another person checks it, and if indeed there's a conflict, a third person looks at it.
Right.
And so we tried to find collections. For example, one of the major points they focused on, I really don't know why this was chosen, was lodge records. Partly because we have monstrous amounts of lodge records.
And they were typed, I think, weren't they?
Yeah, many of them were typed.
So Ancestry was interested in coming to you and getting things they could put on their
That's
website.
Right. They put the material. Then there's a system, a link, by which it comes back to the museum, and the document will actually be sent from the museum.
Oh,
so this is a rather unique thing. But I mean, they've gotten, I think they said, I took some notes, they have 3,476 people who are using their fingers.
Oh my God.
But actually,
And,
there's no, if somebody's watching this, they just as well could go to the Holocaust Museum website and find the same stuff?
Well,
or have they done some
no,
things
because,
you haven't
well,
done?
the point is, and we will get it too, that's true. You will find it that way. I would always, as I think any genealogist, go to every source.
Well, of course.
Don't say, gee, this is number 1, therefore I don't need to go to 2 and 3.
Okay, good. But you're saying that when Ancestry did filming, just as when the Family History Museum does filming, Ancestry is giving you a copy of the filming.
No. It's our film.
Okay, but
Other way around. We give them a copy of what we hold.
They put something online that maybe the museum hasn't yet put online.
That's possibly true, yes.
So then, that's what I'm asking.
That's
Once something has gone online on Ancestry,
then it will go into
online?
HSV.
It will.
It will get, but I would still go always to Ancestry. Plus the fact it's a huge, the site, as you know.
Right.
And it's unlikely. Well, it's perfectly possible that somebody's only looking at Holocaust records.
We're almost out of time.
Yeah, I know.
Oh my
You
goodness.
know what? I think we should keep him here another
no,
hour.
no,
and
no.
do a second
I
show.
think so. There's so much to talk about. I was going to.
I'm sorry.
say
Should we wrap it up in some way?
we've got about 30 seconds. You can
Oh,
say
good.
something else, and then
All right.
I think we should do another
Save
show
that.
on.
Now, this is a human interest. One of the current records databases I'm developing
30
relates to
You won't get to the
I
end
won't get
of
to
her.
the end of the
Just
story.
say, I'm going to talk about her in the
all
next
right, I'm
show.
going to talk to it at some other time. But there's a human level of this, which sometimes this isn't dull. Genealogy isn't dull. It's the human contact.
Yeah, that's
And
what you
this,
find about
the
the story I cannot tell.
No.
is wonderful.
Tune in for the next
next week.
Okay.
So, Peter, thank you so much for coming
Thank
down.
you, Arlene.
It's been very interesting, and although I've done research there, I haven't done that much at the Holocaust Museum itself.
I actually carried some books back from Israel years ago to take to your library
Okay.
you didn't have yet.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.